Yay. Okay, so presenter, oops. Let's see what happens here. All right, introduction to Ayurveda. And you'll have this memorized as a word before the night is over. We talked a little bit about who I am. You know, I do all things yogi. It's my passion. Okay, so what we're going to talk about tonight is a preventative holistic medicine from India. It's over 5,000 years old. And so you might be wondering to yourself right now, how on earth could this be relevant in today's contemporary society? Because let's face it, we have access to amazing technologies, amazing healthcare. There's incredible experts out there for us to listen to. So why on earth would we go back to what really is mother's medicine? And here's your answer. Now, this is old data, but it's probably worse data now. But this is from the World Health Organization, I think from like 2012. And it predicts that within 20 years, so we're halfway there, right? More people will be affected by depression than any other health problem. 13% of Americans at that time were on prescriptions for depression, and that's increasing annually. I would say post-pandemic, bless you, we've seen the anxiety and we've seen depression, especially due to the isolation that we've experienced, dramatically rise, as well as suicide rates. In America alone, there's 2.5 million deaths each year. We have 350 million people living in America. So on some level, I guess that does seem reasonable. But of the 2.5 million people dying, over 600,000 a year are dying from heart disease alone. And heart disease is, for the most part, preventable and treatable on some level with adjustments in your lifestyle and food. We have almost 600,000 people each year dying of cancer. I don't want to say that all cancer is preventable, nor heart disease, but many cancers are preventable with diet and routine. And then we can fill in with the other diseases that people are dying from. You know, one thing you're hearing a lot about right now is people are being classified as pre-diabetic, meaning that if they don't take physical action, they're going to turn into full diabetics. And a diabetic loses 16 years on average of their life compared to a person who does not have diabetes. So there's probably, this is 14.8, but I'm going to say today there's probably about 18 million people in America with depression. We're spending even more than $90 billion a year on alcohol. So we're self-medicating with alcohol, and now in a lot of states we can self-medicate with marijuana as well. We're spending $374 billion a year on prescription drugs, and that's about $1,000 a year per individual. So you might look at your own life and say, oh no, I'm not spending anywhere near that. I'm not even spending anything. That means somebody else is spending $2,000 a year or $3,000 a year, right? And that's a lot of medication. We're spending at least $60 billion a year trying to lose weight, probably more now because we can all sign up for the apps. Like I think I did the Weight Watchers app, I did the Noom app, I've like explored all the apps thinking I've got to get rid of my pandemic weight as well. 30, it says 35, but now we're already up to 38% of Americans are classified as obese. So even though we have all this contemporary medicine and all this contemporary knowledge and all this access to really even clean whole foods and gyms and everything else, it doesn't look like we're doing very well, does it? No, we're not doing very well. 95% of diets fail and the weight is gained back. The average person will gain 11 pounds for every diet they go on. So not only do you lose the weight, but you gain the weight back and then you gain even more. Diet, body image grossly impacts self esteem. And now we're in the digital age of social media, and we're seeing, especially children, age even 9, 10, 11, really starting to suffer from self esteem and body images, as we have this instant way to compare our faces and our bodies to everybody else who's actually popular out there. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of self doubt around dieting. And then diets alone don't consider your emotional and your spiritual nature. So, for example, post pandemic, everybody's been stressed. We've been isolated. We've been sedentary. We've all experienced, at least collectively, a lot of loss. And you might even be doing all the right things now, eating the proper diet, exercising, and you're finding that weight will not budge. And it's a result of the stress that you've been under, and it's also a result of like a spiritual disconnect, this overall feeling of worry and loss. It's like a collective feeling that we all have that separates us from joy. And when I say joy, I mean the divine. The closer we are to the divine, the more our spiritual needs are met, the more joy we have. And you know yourself, when you feel joy, you feel like getting up in the morning, you spring out of bed, you're excited about life, you want to go outside, you want to be with nature, you want to be with your friends. You know, you're busy and you're active and you're just healthier. Um, One of my favorite teachers, Dr. David Frawley, he wrote an amazing article in 2010, actually. He classifies this period that we're going through as the new time of troubles. So the gurus of yoga predicted that in 2012 we would enter into this 30-year period of adjustment that's really brought on by the movement of the stars and the planets, so astrology, if you will. Do you remember December 21st, 2012, when the world was supposed to end? Do you remember we were all getting ready for that? Yeah, the Mayan calendar ended, and it didn't end, but what did happen is we started what they are calling the shift from the Piscean age into the age of Aquarius. And the gurus of yoga have all said that, you know, for 30 years, starting in 2012, so we're 8 years in, we were going to experience suffering, the likes of which man has never seen before. What needs are really up for us are sustainability, a global era of peace, a way to compassionately pursue our scientific endeavors, humanitarianism, and some kind of cultural resonance or renaissance, if you will. But before we get to all that, so that's going to come, but before we get to all of that, we're going to find that technology is influencing us socially and having a lot of control over our lives. We're going to find that we have drug-based social solutions. So, you know, if a person's anxious or depressed, they're going to give them a drug. They're not going to give them a hug, right? There's going to be a lot of social disruption. We're going to see an increase in terrorism, new diseases. Thank you, coronavirus. A displaced population, so as the climate shifts, and we're seeing that already, like in the southwest of America. I was listening to NPR today. They were talking about the dams and how low the dams are that provide the energy and electricity to feed the West. And they're like, okay, well, we got it this year, but we don't know what we're going to do if this happens again next year, you know? So we're kind of at the point where people need to think, where am I going to live? You know, am I going to live in the Southwest? Is it sustainable? Am I going to live in Florida? Is it sustainable? And probably they're all going to have to come to Ohio. And in general, we're going to see an overall lack of meaning and purpose. And that's what I see. So I work most intimately with people. And when I talk most intimately to people, they're suffering because they feel like they're purposeless in the world. And to be purposeless in the world takes you as far away from joy as you probably can get, right? Because you're sitting there and everything's fine. Like everything's fine today. There's nothing wrong with today. But if you don't feel connected and purposeful, then you're suffering. So Dr. David Frawley, one of my teachers, he's saying that during this time, we might be looking out at all this stuff that's happening in the world, but what we really need to be doing is looking in. We need to be looking in, and when we personally, on an individual level, balance our own inner ecology, the outer ecology will come to balance. And that just makes sense if we could take this message and share it with all 9 billion people walking on the world, right? Just makes sense. So we have Ayurveda. Ayurveda is known as the art of living. It's known as the science of life, and it's also known as the mother of healing. Ayurveda is really a diagnostic tool. The tool is written in the language of nature, in the language of the stars. So as we get into Ayurveda, you'll find that we talk about like fire in the body and wind in the mind and earth in the body. And then we look at food that way as well. And then we look at our activities that way as well. So it's really this beautiful way for you to start to relate to yourself in language that you understand. So, you might at some point find that your belly's really upset and there's a lot of heat in your esophagus and it hurts to swallow and you almost have like a burning sensation. And so you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you that you have acid reflux. Here's a purple pill. He usually will tell you what you're supposed to eat and not eat, but in those moments it's fast and can you even hear it, right? You just know that if you take a purple pill now once a day, you can continue your life, right? And you might not even pause to think what acid reflux is. You might even associate it with anything going on in your body. You just walk around, you're like, oh, I have acid reflux. 30 of my friends do as well. It's just what people get. In Ayurveda, we would say, oh, wow, the fire in your body is too high. Your digestive fire is so high that it's actually letting the fire spill out into your esophagus. And we have to figure out a way to cool you down. And then we talk about the foods and the routine and the thoughts that actually will cool you down so that over time you'll come to a balanced state and you no longer are reliant upon a purple pill. And it has a lot to do with the mind, some of the diseases that we're suffering through. When you look at the word Ayurveda, it's really two separate words. Ayu means life, and Veda means knowledge. So if you come to yoga class all the time, you hear me say the Vedas, the Vedanta. The Veda means all knowledge. It's all knowledge that a human can actually comprehend, which I think that is very interesting because it implies that there's things we can't understand. And one of the big things we can't understand is how the body heals. So we've literally spent billions of dollars on research trying to figure out how the body heals. Of course, we're going to capture this technology to prevent aging and whatnot, right? But they don't know how the body heals. It's magic. It's magic. Humans may never understand how the body heals. Veda includes all the knowledge of before you incarnated. So when we look at a whole human in Ayurveda, we want to know about the condition of your mother and your father and even your grandmothers and your grandfathers. And in fact, it's most probable that you're most like your maternal grandmother. And in America, it's very interesting because we have such a disconnect in our families. If I sat here and asked everyone, what was your grandma and grandpa's name, you probably could tell me. But what was your grandma's maiden name might stump you up. And then what were your great-grandparents' names and where did they live? How many kids did they have and stuff? And we're like, I don't really know anymore. But the family history, the seven generations back, actually influences how you are today very much, because it is assumed that with you being incarnated, you've brought in also habits and abilities of your family system. How many? Sorry, go ahead. How many generations back? Seven generations back.
We don't have seven generations in the United States. It's gonna be elsewhere.
When would be seven? Oh, like
Yeah,
300 years?
Yeah, we're so young.
300 years? Yeah, but a little less than 300.
We're almost.
Yeah, so I did go on Ancestry.com, and I happen to have a relative who's really into genealogy. So they did trace back the first person in my family who came to America, and it happened to just be seven generations back. Yeah.
So you're saying there is seven, because I did a DAR, and I'm from the very first founders of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And we had to do a major research between researchers down south and up north to even be proven. So I didn't think it was seven generations back.
Well, even if it's 5 or 7, my whole family's a bunch of hooligans. Yeah. But even if it's 5 or 7 generations back that you can trace, it really is irrelevant unless you can get like a full history. That's why, part of Ayurvedic understanding is sitting down and thinking about, well, how was my sister and how is my brother like me? And when I got together with my partner and had a child, like, what of me, what of him came out? When my parents were together and I was conceived, what season was it? Was it a very stressful time in their life? Did my father have like a habit of smoking, a habit of drinking? Did my mother have a habit of depression? How did my grandparents grow up, or my great grandparents grow up? Did they have a period of working in a coal mine, working in a steel mill, working in the fields? Did they have a period where they did not have access to daily adequate food? Am I from an Irish background? Did I suffer on some level through a potato famine? So we can get into like all of this stuff over time because it's influencing your nature here today. And the DNA studies that they call it epigenetics, the epigenetic studies that they currently do support all of this theory, if you will, that's behind Ayurveda as well. Veda also includes why you were born. What is your life purpose? It makes an assumption that you're born to be a little kid and have a great time. It makes an assumption that you're born to be a teenager and have a great time and get an education. It assumes that you will participate in society on some level and probably reach societal goals that have been culturally agreed upon based on the society you chose to incarnate in. So it honors that when you're off of those set standard goals, there's going to be suffering. It considers aging, it considers dying, and it considers what happens to you after death. So that's what Veda is. Yes. Sorry. It's okay. I love it when you ask questions. So we have a role choosing how we incarnate? Absolutely. Like where? Yes. Oh. Yes. So the idea is, the theory is that you picked your incarnation and you picked the lessons you would learn in this life, and you picked your parents as well. And you picked the parents that would support you in the goals that you spiritually wish to achieve in this incarnation. Can we prove any of this? I'm sitting here talking about reincarnation, like that's pretty far out there for a lot of people, right? We can't, so it doesn't matter. So these are really advanced practices of Ayurveda, but that's where we can go with it if you're willing to make that type of spiritual commitment to the philosophy of yoga and the philosophy of Ayurveda. Like we can go there, and we're going there, aren't we, Angie? Like we're going there. But I'm just offering you the potential of this science of life. It's truly fascinating. The yogic lifestyle, we call it a trinity, and it's Ayurveda, yoga, and Tantra. Now, oddly, I know you guys come to yoga class and you think you're doing a physical practice, don't you? Because we're physically moving our bodies, but that actually is not the case. So, Ayurveda is actually the physical practice of this Vedic wisdom. And then yoga is actually the spiritual practice of this Vedic wisdom. And then what we call Tantra is actually the psychological practice. So it's a trinity. And if you're going to yoga class and you're just moving your body, there's no spiritual messaging, there's no breath work, there's no introduction to the philosophy, you're really missing out, because the reason we move in yoga is to move our body with breath to create and cultivate a connection with the divine. And when I say divine, I mean joy. And then Ayurveda gives you the means by which to be able to show up for class and perform on a level that feels easy and graceful and sweet and nice. It supports your mind. And then Tantra helps you deal with all of our messed upness. So, what you'll find is in your mind, you just have a lot of habits, beliefs, things that have been put upon you that are causing you to suffer, and we need some mechanism, some means by which to ease that suffering as well. So it's really a trinity, and it's all supposed to be working together hand in hand. You can already see this is a big commitment to healing, isn't it? Yeah. Um, there are 8 actual branches of Ayurvedic medicine. They call it Ashtanga, which means 8, Ashtanga Ayurveda. What I teach really would fall into the category of number 1, internal medicine. I would be called what's called a fire teacher, because I teach you how to manipulate the Agni, the fire in your digestive system. When I get that fire all aligned within you, your mind comes online as well. So that's kind of my specialty. But you'll see 5,000 years ago, they were doing surgeries. I know, hard to believe. They had a specialty in eye, ears, nose, and throat. They had a specialty in pediatrics, toxicology, psychology, rejuvenation, aphrodisiacs. They even, once you get into psychology, they call it Bhuta Vidya, and Bhuta means ghost. So once you get into psychology, they would say, and even if you have a bacterial infection or a parasite or something like that, you are actually infected with some foreigner outside of you. And they even use the term Bhuta, which really means like demons. So a parasite or a bacteria, any like addiction you're suffering from, any mental illnesses you're suffering from, they look at that as you're suffering from it, but it's also not part of you, just like a parasite is not part of you and a bacteria is not part of you. So it's a really refreshing way to look at diseases of the mind as well, because anxiety is considered a collective demon, and you can rid the person of the collective demon. I know, it's great. So when we're looking at anything, okay, so whether it's looking at me or looking at the building we're sitting in, we're playing in what's called the field, in the microcosm. And this microcosm that we're sitting in, which is very real and very material and very earthly and very much here, is made up of what we call 5 great elements. So they classify everything as being made of some combination, some unique combination of space, water, wind, fire, and earth. So you sitting here can kind of, put your hands on your body and say, my body is made up of some unique combination of these 5 great elements. Inside of me, I have space. And maybe you can think about even the space in your nostrils, right? You're feeling the air flow through. My body is made up of water. Well, certainly you have saliva in your mouth and you have blood flowing through your veins, and maybe you can sense that. Wind. Well, the breath is coming in and out through my nose and my lungs are moving, but also I'm thinking right now. And I'm thinking, and thoughts are moving. So something in me is blowing these thoughts around. I have wind in my mind. I have fire in my belly. Like maybe you ate before you came here, maybe you didn't get to. If you didn't get to eat before you came here, your belly's probably gurgling and churning. And when you go without food, you can feel that fire, can't you? It feels a little acidic. And then this, obviously, my knees, my bones, my meat, my flesh, my fat, it's very solid, it's very earth-like. So it's the way to look at yourself and say, yeah, I'm some amazing combination of these elements, and if I understood my combination better, I would understand how to manage myself. So let's go through these kind of quickly. Space in Ayurveda, sometimes it's called akasha. Space is the one element you can really kind of just set aside, because I know this is a lot of information. With space, it never changes. Space's job is just kind of hold everything together. And when you think about space, you can imagine you're an astronaut floating in space. It's probably very cold out there. It's very light. We're floating, and it's probably very dry. So when we talk about space, we think about the properties of coldness, lightness, and dryness. And you can almost, like, even in this moment, not knowing anything about Ayurveda, but knowing a lot about food, you could probably think, well, what food is really cold and light and dry? Can you think of an example? Not ice cream. Light and dry. Like, I think of popcorn a lot. Maybe it's not cold, but it's very light, it's very dry. Yeah. Can you think of anything cold, light, and dry? Kind of maybe like I don't know, some kind of lettuce. What did you say? Butter is not cold and light and dry. Butter is not light and dry. No, more like a lettuce. Don't you think a lettuce is very light and it can be very dry? Yeah, and you stick it in the fridge, it's very cold. Then we have water. We call it water jala. In water, it represents always the emotion of love. And water is very cool and smooth and nourishing. Water is very stable. And that's good because blood is a lot made of water, isn't it? So we want that to be stable, don't we? Yeah. And love is very stable. And then there's air, which we call vayu. And again, you've got this coldness, this lightness. When you think about air, you can think about, fall in Ohio is awesome, isn't it? It's like abrupt and erratic and changing. You can watch a dry leaf like blow around crazy. And that's very much all the properties of air: very dry, very brittle, unpredictable, fresh, energetic. Think about a friend you know. Do you have a friend who's kind of erratic? Maybe they show up late all the time. Maybe they're a little odd. They look at the world a little different and make you laugh all the time. They're energetic. They bring freshness. Do you have a friend like that? Whose personality is like that? Yeah. So you might think, oh wow, that friend, I never noticed it. But yeah, she probably has a lot of air in her because she has these qualities. In Ayurveda, the air, we'll get to the combination, but it's interesting to understand that the wind, we'll just call it the wind. There's 5 of these winds in your body, and this is what we use holistically as a diagnostic tool. So we would say that as you're breathing in, there's a wind that goes up. As you're swallowing, there's an air that goes down. There's an air that's pushing out when you have a baby or you menstruate or you eliminate. There's an air that's going this way, and then there is an air that's going out all around in every direction. And it's interesting to think about this because even when you think about yoga, we're doing this and we're going down to the ground and we're pulling our arms around. And it's all an attempt to get that one of five winds back to our subtle body because it makes us feel grounded. In yoga, we're inhaling the deep breath, we're exhaling the deep breath, we're inhaling, the belly is pushing out, we're exhaling, the navel's pulling in, we'll draw up on the pelvic floor even to get all of those winds to reverse, to bring all of that energy deep within us. And that's why at the end of yoga class, you feel so relaxed and grounded because we have literally used the practice of yoga to ground these five winds that live in your body. Interesting, huh? The element of fire is, if you're looking at a fire, it's hot, it's bright, it's abrupt, snap, crackle, pop, right? It can be perfectly quiet and just burning, then all of a sudden it just sets off, right? Yeah, you ever think about how mad you get sometimes? Like, aren't you just fine? Like, I don't even look at my phone 90% of my life, but every once in a while, I'm just sitting there having a nice day. And then you get that email or that text message, and all of a sudden you're just like, aren't you? It just gets mad so fast. Like, and that's the fire in you acting up. And can you think of maybe a friend you have who is really intense, who's large and in charge, who's knows everything, who's right most of the time, who's quick to anger? I mean, you can look at that friend and you're like, oh boy, I bet they have a lot of fire in their mind, right? They're not like my erratic friend who's super fun, the life of the party. They're not my windy friend. This is a different friend. This is my fire friend. And this starts to help you also manage your interpersonal relationships. So if you're living in a home with someone who's very windy, like, just release your expectation that they will do anything in a practical order and that they will be on time. Just you let it go because they can't help themselves. And if you're living with that person of a fire nature, we don't like that fire nature so much. So we have to think, well, how do we cool our environment? Just like there's five fires in the body, there's also five winds in the body, there's also five fires in the body. And this is what they're in charge of. I think my favorite one is always Sadaka Pitta, which is located in the heart, and Sadaka, sad, and then the heart. And then if you have like heart disease or you've had a heart attack, most of the time we'll go to that dosha, pitta dosha, will go to that one fire of the heart. And then there's therapeutic procedures that are specifically done because of that specific fire that's out of balance. So this can get really, really, really diagnostically specific. The earth is known as Prithvi, and I always think of it like a rock sitting in a forest, and it's cold, and maybe it's sitting in a little puddle of water, and it's covered with moss, and it's just heavy and dense. If you put your hand on it, it feels chilly. And then it just has such substance. And if it were on your walking trail, you might walk by it for 20 years and it doesn't appear that that rock changes too much. It changes, but it doesn't appear that it changes too much. And if something were to happen and that rock got moving going down the hill, boy, that rock wouldn't stop, would it? You just get the heck out of that rock's way. And that's the earth. And you probably have a friend in your life who's just very consistent and very stable and very slow to change. Sometimes they may appear stubborn, they may resist change, but then once they take something on, they commit to it, and then they never, ever, ever stop. This is what they'll do forever. And you might be like that as well, which just means you have a lot of earth in you. And then, of course, there's the diagnostic tools we use, understanding that there's 5 different earths governing different parts of your body, which is a little too much for you. You might think about the earth as it relates to mucus in your system. So what you're going to find is these energies aren't the mucus, they create the mucus though. So cold, heavy, dense, when you get a cold, it kind of stays up in your reproductive system. And then that sticky, heavy, dense, earthy substance is actually creating, the mucus that we get from allergies, colds, things like that. So we classify disease as well as vata, pitta, or kapha. So now you're sitting here like, well, who am I? Because you're some unique combination of these elements. And the way I like to teach Ayurveda is I segregate the mind from the body, and I do that for educational purposes. If you take other quizzes, it's just going to like lump you together into kind of like one thing, but we're going to segregate them out. So, what I want you to do is, I want you to pull out the quizzes that are printed lengthwise. And the first quiz says, your mind, and the next quiz says your body. And what I want you to do is, I want you to check off whatever resonates with you, and then we'll add up the checks to come to a total at the bottom. Now, if you find that you just cannot answer the question, you're so confused by it, check the blue column. So you're like, I can't. So let's even look at the first one. Sleeping patterns. I sleep very lightly. I fall asleep easily. I sleep very deeply. Let's just say I'm totally confused. I don't know which one is the right answer. You're going to check I sleep very lightly because it's in the blue column. Does that make sense to you? Yes. And then you may be out of balance, and that's going to confuse you as well. That's okay. Just, do your best in thinking of a time maybe when you were, I don't know, feeling like a little bit better than you feel now. So I'm going to let you work on this for like Zoom. Play from the current slide. Okay, so let's do it this way. Pull out your sheet that says mind on it, the one you just took, and then who has the most blue check marks? Okay, and who has the most orange, and who has the most green? All right, so if you have the most blue check marks, then you in your mind are what we call Vata dosha. So you can write that down, Vata dosha in my mind. And Vata dosha is the wind. So you have a windy mind. Of course you do, Gemini. And then if you have the predominance of orange, that's Pitta, not Pita, it's Pitta dosha. And you have a predominance of Pitta dosha in your mind, and that means you have more fire in your mind. And if you have most checks in green, that's a predominance of Kapha dosha, or earth. You have a predominance of earth in your mind. Now, it's very rare for you to have checked only blues. You probably had like some in blue, some in orange, and some in green, right? You had a mix. And that's because you have all 5 elements in your body and mind, and they're all combining in some way to create what we call these 3 great energies, which we're going to get into. And you wouldn't want like an only windy mind, because all the wind does is create and think. A creative thinking mind is a great mind, but if that mind can't access pitta or the fire to come to a decision, that's a problem. And if that mind can't access the earth, kapha, to follow through on the decision made, that's also a problem, isn't it? So we're glad that these elements are somehow playing nicely, hopefully, in our minds, and you have a predominant one that's going to give you your personality and determine a routine that's best for you. Now, when you look at the other sheet, the body sheet, who had mostly blues in their body? No blue bodies. Okay, that would have been a predominance of Vata dosha, or the wind in the body. Who had oranges? Okay, that's Pitta, so that's fire in the body. And then who had earth? Who had green? Yeah, oh, you missed that side. You jumped on. It's okay. It's okay. We'll figure it out as we talk, I promise, because something's not going to resonate with you, and then you can take your quiz real fast while it's not resonating. Okay, so what you're going to find is Ayurveda is overwhelmingly confusing, because this is your possible by mind body types. You can be Vata Vata, Vata Pitta, Vata Kapha, Pitta Vata, da, 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 da. And now you're just like, okay, I quit. Like, I already quit. That's way too much. Don't you think that's way too much? Like, totally agree with you. It's way too much. So we're going to make this as easy as we possibly can in an introduction. And we're just going to start with our digestive system to determine if you are indeed in your body a Vata or not. So a Vata, a wind digestive system, is irregular. So what that means is, ideally you'll get up in the morning and that's when you ideally will eliminate. But a person with a Vata or a wind digestive system, maybe they go, maybe they don't go. And when they do go, the consistency can vary a lot. So in Ayurveda, I apologize in advance, but we have to talk about elimination a lot. It's actually one of our diagnostic tools. But like the perfect potty is kind of the one where you just sit down and it just comes out and it's a one white poo poo and there's nothing on the tissue, right? Like that's the perfect poo poo. And sometimes that happens for Vata, but a lot of times Vata might become constipated. So they're prone to dryness. So then you're sitting there and you're trying to go and you're not going, or maybe you're going every other day. And then sometimes you might just go excessively. It's totally irregular. Vatas have a hard time gaining weight. So a classical Vata person is a person who presents very thin to the point that their bone structure, like if you were to hug a Vata, you might feel the hard bones underneath their skin. When Vatas do gain weight, they usually wait for like menopausal types of periods, and then they're going to gain weight mostly around their midsection. It settles on the stomach. Does anyone feel like their body is kind of like that? Vatas are prone to just irregularity. So very tall, very short. Big wide eyes, little tiny eyes. Big huge teeth, tiny little teeth. Teeth tend to be crooked. Instead of having an asymmetrical face, you'll have a face where like a cheekbone is higher than, or the jaw is offset a little bit. Vata's hair and nails and skin, dry. Vata mind, it's just like the wind as well. So Vata mind is hopping from one thing another. So I always laugh because my Vata friends are reading 90 books at the same time, and they can't tell you the name of a book or who wrote any of the books that they're reading. They just have this big, huge pile that they're somehow flipping through. They love all things new and shiny. So they're like a crow. They're like a bird or a butterfly, just going for the shiny, sparkle stuff. Vatas are talkative. They're generous. They're the life of the party. They're complex, they're creative. They also get burnt out really easily. So you'll find the Vata tends to overdo themselves and then have to spend a lot of time alone to recover. Does anyone feel that way? Yes? All right, so that's our predominant Vatas. Predominant fire, again, we can start with the digestive system. So Pitta in the digestive system is a strong digestive system. So this is a person who is hungry. So like they want their breakfast, they want their lunch, they want their dinner, and they want it at the same time. And if you don't feed them, they get hangry. Whereas a Vata has a weaker digestive system, so they may skip meals, they may have really a low desire to eat. Pittas usually regularly eliminate, and usually around the same time each day. If they have any problems, it's that it's just too hot in their digestive system, and that may lead to like a loose elimination. Pitta's digestive system is affected a lot by stress, so they are the ones who might end up with, acid reflux or just anything hot in their nature. When pittas gain weight, and pittas, they love to exercise, they really can tear through their food when they're good and in balance. When they do gain weight, they gain it everywhere. So it's kind of just like that puffy weight that you just put on every part of your body. In the mind, pittas have, they have a fire in their mind. So the fire in their mind is like lighting everything up. It's this incredible sense of discernment. So they tend to be right about things, which means they feel like they're right all the time about things. So there's people who have a need to be right or think they're always right. Pittas are usually people in like a leadership or management type of situation, high intellect. They can also be like the fireman type of situation, willing to run in and risk their life and be very courageous. So do you feel like you're any of that in body and mind? Does that resonate a little bit? And then you have the earth. In an earth, digestive system is just very strong and very stable. So of all the different types of body you could be, the earth is the type that stays most in balance because they have real strong immunity and they have strong digestion. The earth type is just a generally bigger person. So this is a person who's always been bigger, probably from childhood, and is always thinking that they, need to lose weight, even though it's just their body type. But in our societal standards, they feel like they're overweight. So one of my friends, she's an earth, and she's always like, I can't even walk by a tray of cookies. I'll wear it home on my ass. So they easily gain weight. It's really, really hard for them to actually lose weight. In the mind, it's that person, it's the memory keeper in your family. It's the person who literally remembers everything. It's that friend you go to when you need comfort, when you need someone to really listen to you. You go to a pitta with a problem and they're going to solve it for you. And you go to a Vata with a problem and they're going to get bored and stop listening and try to take you out to have some fun to distract you, right? But the Kapha is that person who'll hold your hand and sit there, very compassionate, very emphatic. Does that, empathetic, does that sound like anybody you know, or does that feel like yourself? Okay, so one thing to understand about these energies that are arising in you is, think about, we'll talk about Vata dosha, the wind. So the wind is the combination of space and air. Air wants to expand. Like we watch it move, right? The wind wants to go everywhere, doesn't it? And space just wants to hold everything together. So you have an energy wanting to hold everything together partnered with an energy that wants to expand. You would imagine that creates a tension there, don't you? And that tension is called the dosha. And dosha means that which goes out of balance. So when you say my dosha, I have Vata dosha, I have a predominance of wind, and this is an energy. And this energy has to be worked with to stay in balance. So think about the wind in your mind. Have you ever just had a nice, peaceful day with slow thoughts? You have. Have you had a day where you can't even sleep? The thoughts are just like, psh. All right, so we have low wind and we have high wind days. All right, so the dosha, that which goes out of balance, the energy is either giving you a low wind day or a high wind day, right? You have control of that dosha, of that energy. You have control of that energy based on the decisions you're making in your life for food, routine, and of course, how you deal with your emotional nature. So let's say I have a million things on my calendar. I'm making a million phone calls. I got the stereo on full blast. Finally, at 9 o'clock, I sit down at night to watch an action movie. And then I go to bed at 10 and I can't sleep. Did I do anything good for that dosha in my mind, that wind in my mind? I just aggravated the hell out of it, didn't I? Yeah. Yeah, say my belly, so we got fire in our belly. I got some pitta dosha in my belly, helping me to digest my food. Let's say that my belly doesn't feel good. So I skip breakfast, but then by lunch I'm starving and I go and get a fried chicken sandwich, french fries, and a Diet Coke, right? And then I go about my life and whatever's going on in my life, dinner's not so good either, okay? I tried, it was pizza, I skipped the sausage, right? And now I watch a horror movie and I go to bed and I don't sleep because I have acid reflux. Did I do anything good for my fire in my belly that day? No. Let's say it's post-pandemic. I've done nothing but be miserable and sit on my butt for 20 months, right? I put on a few pounds. It took some time to put on the pounds. It's going to take time to get off the pounds, but I know I got pounds on me, and pounds are kapha dosha. So I get up, I skip breakfast, and I freak out at lunch. And I make good choices, but I certainly overindulge. But then I feel terrible about myself for overindulging. So I decide to take a nap. And then I wake up all groggy and I'm like, I can't even make dinner. And I go out to dinner that night, right? Did I do anything to move the earth on my body that day? No. So you see how we're in charge of the doshas, even though it appears they're in charge of us? Like, that's literally how it works.
That's so good.
What is so good?
Taking naps.
I know, and sometimes taking naps are good, but not for kapha dosha ever. No napping. All right, so let's ask ourselves, am I currently in the moment balanced? So we're going to take our balance quizzes, and I think yours are printed differently. Yours are lengthwise. And just imagine how you've been feeling like in the last 21 days, and we'll try to get a score on this now.